Last week, former NFL offensive lineman and Super Bowl champion with the Ravens, Michael Oher, who was depicted in the movie The Blind Side, was in the news as he petitioned the Tennessee court to terminate his conservatorship under Sean and Leanne Tuohy. Now, there's been a lot of talk about his allegations and the Touhys' response, but we're going to talk about this from a legal standpoint. We're going to do it with a sports lawyer and professor at New York Law School. His name is Dan Lust, and he joins me now. Dan, how's it going, man? Good to have you here.
Pleasure to join you. I'll say this is one of a handful of stories each year from the sports world that kind of perforates the legal world. So certainly happy to break it down with you.
Yeah, anytime that happens, I feel like we definitely have to try to get a legal perspective on it and definitely talk about it from that standpoint. So, Dan, there's a lot going on here from a legal standpoint. So I want your help in looking at the cases on each side that may have in sort of this situation. So Oher claims that the Touhys deceived him into a conservatorship and told him that he had been legally adopted. He also has other allegations, including that he didn't receive any money from a deal that the Touhys and their two biological children secured with 20th Century Fox. Based on what you've seen thus far and heard thus far, does Oher have a case here?
You know, certainly on its face, I think Oher may have a case, but, you know, really anybody can bring a lawsuit for anyone against anything. I think Oher really is alleging some elements of fraud, deceit, deception, right? He was, in theory, claiming, right? And everyone's allowed to claim certain things, but the plaintiff in the case has the burden of actually proving them. That's what we call, in fancy lawyer terms, the burden of proof. But at the end of the day, you could claim, right, that I didn't know that, you know, I wasn't being adopted. I was placed under a conservatorship. I haven't received, you know, $1 from the movie, and my siblings and my, you know, alleged parents, right, they got all the money. But at the end of the day, we're going to see really what comes out in terms of discovery and accounting. But what Oher is claiming, at least if established, certainly there is a claim here.
All right, so certainly there's a claim there. Now, we've got to talk about the Touhys because they responded to the petition. They called Oher's legal maneuver, quote, a shakedown. Their lawyers have said they plan to end the conservatorship. So how do you think the Touhy family will approach this legally going forward?
Yeah, the Touhy family has had kind of a couple of responses here. I think first and foremost, there's been no allegation that the Touhys used this conservatorship to take any piece of Michael Oher's NFL earnings. This seems to be a case, at least according to Michael Oher, where the Touhys used the conservatorship, the concept to get control of someone's finances. If a person maybe, you know, mentally is unable to, people might think of the Britney Spears case a couple of years ago. But here, right, Michael Oher is just alleging that the Touhys used this conservatorship to maybe wrongfully take portions of his movie proceeds. So I guess that's kind of step number one here, right? Why the Touhys have claimed now to end the conservatorship? They're claiming maybe that's not that important because the movie's over and they weren't really trying to get his NFL contracts. And now he's retired from the NFL. The other piece of that certainly is, you know, what the Touhys are, how they're responding in terms of a shakedown. You know, the truth is anytime a lawsuit is filed, there are going to be these things called pre-suit negotiations. No one really just walks into court and files a lawsuit and doesn't talk to the other side about doing it in advance. And sometimes there are very lawful settlement conversations that occur. You know, will you pay me a certain amount of money? Otherwise, I'm going to file this lawsuit. Certainly, if you cross the line and get pretty close to extortion or what the Touhys are calling a shakedown. But other times you can have a very permissive conversation about whether this case should be settled before it hits the public realm. So I'm not really sure where that falls, but certainly you could have pre-suit negotiations that are by no means a shakedown.
Gotcha. That can happen where people ask for money for a settlement before this actually goes to court if it needs to go there. But we've looked at both sides. What is next here, Dan, for Oher and the Touhy family? And can this play out pretty long legally? Do you see this going pretty long in terms of how it can play out?
You know, I kind of referenced at the beginning, there's a term in the law called an accounting. It's a financial term, right? It's looking at the books and records. At the end of the day, the question is, right, I mean, there's really two forms of relief. Number one, Michael Oher wants to end the conservatorship. The Touhys are doing that voluntarily, so cross that one out. The second one is Michael Oher's claim that the conservatorship was used to rob him of his fair share of the movie proceeds. And that's the larger question here. You bring in a forensic accountant. You take someone to open up the books and records. What money from that movie was received and put into the Touhys' pockets? Same question. What percentage of that money was given to Michael Oher? An accountant will come in, kind of review people's finances, what the incoming money, the outgoing money, and try to put together a forensic accounting, re-put everything back in place as if the money had kind of lawfully came in. We can shake that out. The Touhys are claiming that Michael Oher was paid his fair share, and any Comments to the contrary are just not true. So, it's a case that there is a fairly simple answer. Now, whether either side is going to accept that answer is another thing. And Dexter, I'll go one further. Even if, right, Michael Oher is wrong that the accounting, was correct, that he was paid his, what they're calling a fair share, the question that Michael Oher's attorneys will have is, did Michael Oher have consent to sign into this conservatorship? Was he told what this was ahead of time? Was he duped into thinking this was legal adoption papers? But this actually was something akin to a Britney Spears conservatorship. And why was that needed? So yes, the kind of factual answer of how much money everyone was paid, that's pretty clear. But this element of consent to enter the conservatorship, consent to enter into this specific breakdown of money, that's not a very easy question, and one that I imagine drags on for some amount of time.
Yeah, not an easy question. A lot of questions to answer around this situation between Michael Oher and the Touhy family. We will see how that all plays out. Dan Luss, sports lawyer and professor at New York Law School. He will be all on top of this, I am sure. Dan, appreciate the time, you breaking this down for us legally, and I'm sure we'll be talking back about this again later down the road.
My pleasure, anytime.